So hello and welcome to my review of Dying Light 2, Stay Human. And the first thing I should say is that I'm a big fan of the original game. I've played Dying Light 1 quite a few times now. I've done all the side quests, all the additional content, and I've completed the following DLC, which was a very significant addition to the base game. And it was great fun. And being a fan, I was really looking forward to Dying Light 2. Especially after waiting for it for so long, because I think it took about 7 years to come out. But I'm afraid Dying Light 2 has turned out to be something of a disappointment. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to enjoy there, but overall it wasn't really as good as I was hoping it would be, frankly. So anyway, to establish my critics' credentials, I have finished the main game of Dying Light 2, and I've done a few of the side quests, but I've not really explored the deep lore of the story beyond looking at some YouTube videos to find out about alternative endings. In other words, I'm not presenting myself as an expert on the game by any means. I'm just an average player. But at the same time, that's not going to stop me pointing out a few things that I really didn't like about Dying Light 2. Now, my first set of problems revolve around the city of Villedor, which is where most of the game is set, and my main issue with Villedor is that it's not very credible as a location. It just doesn't come across as a real place. It seems fake. In contrast, the setting of the first Dying Light game was a Middle Eastern city called Harran, and Harran as a location was very believable because everything about Harran came across as being authentic. Even the parkour element of the game had a rational explanation because, at the time of the outbreak, the city was hosting an international parkour competition, and after the city was quarantined, the surviving parkour contestants ended up helping the survival effort by doing things like running around, finding resources, rescuing people, and getting aid to the different parts of the city. So within the context of the story of Dying Light 1, everything about Harran came across as being believable. It all kind of made sense, and there weren't really any false notes about it. There was nothing to break your immersion in the gameplay. However, when we get to Dying Light 2, the city of Villedor comes across as some kind of fantasy land. It's just not a location I can take seriously. And I can't take it seriously for a number of reasons. First up, the trees are a stupid idea. Nearly every roof in Villedor has at least one tree growing out of it. And they're not even growing in soil, they're growing right out of the roofs themselves. The game is set 20 years after the collapse of society, so I get that things will start to return to nature, but the idea that you'd get forests planting themselves on the tops of skyscrapers is completely ludicrous. And even if trees could take root in concrete and roofing felt, the first high wind would just knock them all over. When you think about it, it's a ridiculous idea. And every time I see a tree growing out of a roof, it just reminds me I'm playing a game. I mean, they look good. The views over the city with the trees growing everywhere are really spectacular. But this doesn't make up for the fact that the trees are a fundamentally dumb idea. The most you get growing out of a rooftop is some grass, weeds, a few shrubs and some moss. Any trees you could possibly find up there would look like bonsai trees and would probably be about a foot high. And, really, aside from looking nice, what do the trees add to the gameplay apart from providing you with a bit of resin? They don't really add anything at all. In my opinion, adding rooftop trees was a poor artistic choice. It was a matter of style over substance. Another very poor artistic choice, in my opinion, is the constant presence of flying stuff in the air. When you're outside, the air is constantly churning with leaves and scraps of paper and bits of rubbish. I get that in real life you might have the odd leaf or plastic bag floating around when it was windy, but in Villedor the atmosphere looks like it's constantly churning with garbage. I mean, there's so much of it, it's sometimes like you're stuck inside a snow globe. Why is there so much crap in the air, and why is it constantly swirling around? Who thought this was a good idea? And what exactly does the flying trash achieve? Because once you start noticing all the flying stuff, it gets really, really distracting. Again, it appears to be another weird artistic choice that is not only annoying, it also makes Villedor less believable as a real-world location. The rain in Villedor is incredibly irritating. I mean, I found it actively depressing, and it's one of those things about Dying Light 2 that I actually came to hate. In the first game, there was some rain in Harran. Okay, you'd occasionally get a light shower to vary the weather, but I doubt the rain in Harran ever bothered anyone, and it certainly didn't affect gameplay. In contrast, the rain in Villedor is like having someone throw buckets of dirty water in your face. At first, I used to think the rain effect that speckled the screen was because my character was wearing a visor, which would have made sense. But it turns out it doesn't matter what you wear. Whenever it rains, you're always going to get water splashed in your eyes. And I find it so annoying. I mean, in real life, I wouldn't want to go out in weather like this. So why would I want to do it in a game I'm playing for fun? And if you want to include stupid weather effects in your game, why not have the option to turn it off, which I'm guessing would be easy enough. There were times when I felt like abandoning this game completely when it started raining. Now, you might think that's an overreaction, but the rain just made the whole playing experience thoroughly miserable and unpleasant. Dying Light is all about the parkour, and I get that the developers wanted to create an interesting and varied climbing environment for their players. But some of the parkour elements in Dying Light 2 are just silly and break immersion. Now, I might wonder, at the strange design choices of some of the buildings, like the fact that nearly every skyscraper in the city has these long window ledges running around them. I mean, they look weird, but I can half believe that these might be real because, architects make really bizarre choices sometimes. And I can also understand that over time people might have gone around nailing up planks in useful places and then painting them yellow to make them stand out. I can also get the hoists with the counterweights because I can see how they'd be really useful. And I also get the zip lines as being incredibly practical. In short, I can understand a lot of the climbing apparatus in Villedor, but what I can't understand is these monkey bars, because the monkey bars are just a very, very silly idea.
Stop that! It's silly. Very silly indeed.
I mean, monkey bars are everywhere. They're in basements, they're in corridors, they're on the sides of tall buildings, they're on short buildings, they're installed all over the place. The question then being why? Because unlike all the other climbing aids I mentioned earlier, like the zip lines and the hoists, the monkey bars are completely impractical. When I was moving around Villedor, I didn't see a single example of a monkey bar that couldn't have been easily replaced by a hoist, a ladder, some yellow planks or a rope or anything else for that matter. I mean, who in their right mind would take the trouble to install monkey bars 100 feet up the side of an office block? I'm afraid the bars ultimately come across as a lazy design choice. It's like the devs couldn't be bothered to design buildings that had actual authentic swinging structures on them. Like, I don't know, window cleaning platforms or flagpoles or billboard supports or something, so they just slotted in monkey bars every time they thought a bit of swinging action was in order. Again, every time I see one of these damn things, I'm reminded I'm in a game. And all this is in huge contrast to the original game, because in Dying Light 1, all the climbing challenges in Harran were very convincing. They made you feel like you were climbing around on real buildings in a real city. There were no obvious gimmicks to remind you were playing a game. It's true that you had a grappling hook that helped you defy gravity on occasions, but the way the hook worked was at least halfway believable. Well, at least I thought so. I have a similar problem with the windmills. I really enjoyed the first couple of windmills I came across because they were new and interesting, but I was hoping their design might make some kind of sense when I thought about it. But when you stand back and take a proper look at the windmills and try to figure out how they might work, well, it tells out no. The windmills don't make any sense whatsoever. I originally thought these concrete counterweights going up and down might serve some kind of practical purpose, like they were attached to a generator or something, but it soon becomes clear that they don't. They just go up and down for no reason whatsoever, and the only reason they exist is to be a climbing puzzle. As with other things in Villedor, every time I see a windmill, it just breaks my immersion. Another major niggle of mine is these characters, these layabouts. Scattered across the rooftops of Villedor, you get these fireside encampments where people gather to tell stories or put on little plays. And it's a nice enough idea, but why do you have these camps out in the open when you have infected flesh eaters, renegades and bandits nearby, often on rooftops that are right next door to each other? In a realistic situation, these campfires would be inside well-defended settlements, not randomly scattered around on buildings. And as well as the hipster camps, you also have various other eccentrics on the rooftops, like singers and artists and preachers and people complaining about bee stings. And while these people are of some interest, what they mostly do is strip Villedor of any real sense of menace. I mean, no one seems to care about the hordes of infected swarming everywhere, or the gangs of bloodthirsty psychopaths. So really, I mean, why should I give a damn about them either? Everyone is just mixed together in a very weird and unbelievable way. And talking about weird and unbelievable, I've come across 4 funerals in Villedor, and in each case the deceased was either buried in the middle of the road or on a roof. It's like they just buried them where they happened to drop dead. I mean, look at this example. They couldn't be bothered to drop the guy off the side of the roof and bury him in the park, but they could be bothered to carry up this very large gravestone and bury him up here. Again, it's just another example of immersion-breaking weirdness. Some of the voice acting in Dying Light 2 is very peculiar. In particular, I'm thinking about some of the renegade voices, because some of them sound like they're straight out of a kid's cartoon. I mean, this is the voice I'm talking about.
See? Walt was right. These fuckers were eavesdropping on us. First him, then we'll get that GRE employee from the old Villedor. And the boss will be over the moon.
When I first heard it, I thought it must belong to a specific character because it's really so distinctive. But you soon realise that this is just what most of the renegades sound like. It's a kind of high-pitched, crazy clown type of delivery that would be better suited to a Batman villain.
Walt needs to access that GRE place. You get it? That's why we have to find that pilgrim. He's offering a lot of fucking crystals for what he's got. And a lot of boosters.
Yet another very strange style choice that does the game no favours whatsoever. Now you might think I'm being fairly petty complaining about flying trash and monkey bars and funny voices, but you know, it all adds up. When I play a game, I really like to get into it, and off notes and inconsistencies, really bother me. If it doesn't bother you, then that's fine. But these aren't bugs that no one intended. These are conscious design choices that I consider ridiculous, unforced errors. Anyway, next complaint is about the nighttime. In the original Dying Light, nighttime in Harran used to be terrifying. At night the place swarmed with vicious volatiles, and if they ever got on your tail, your death was virtually guaranteed. Perhaps the most horrifying part of Dying Light 1 is when the game suddenly turfs you out into the middle of the city at night, and you have to desperately scramble your way to safety, something that usually results in your swift and unpleasant demise. It's a very scary episode in the game, and for the rest of it you're wondering if the same thing will happen again. Is the game once more going to make you go out into the dreaded night? This niggling fear adds a real feeling of suspense to the gameplay, and it's one of the reasons I enjoyed the original Dying Light so much. It really kept you on your toes. In contrast, nighttime in Villedor is, well, frankly, something of a bore. In Villedor, anything nasty is on street level, and as long as you keep to the rooftops, you're pretty much as safe as houses. In Harran, I rarely ventured out at night because being out at night time was a terrifying ordeal, but in Villedor I rarely venture out at night because it's dull. Now you have to go out at night if you want to complete various quests and challenges, but you don't really need to, and I rarely bothered. In Harran, surviving at night was an accomplishment, but in Villedor it's just another day at the office really. I can understand that the devs wanted to try and balance the game by making it easier to go out at night, but I'm not sure why they thought balance was anything anyone wanted or needed. What they really did was just turn nighttime into a slightly darker and more dangerous version of daytime, and I don't think anyone is better off really. So the guns, well, there aren't any. There are no guns at all in the game, which I think is another very strange decision. If you look deeper into the story, you apparently discover that all the guns in Villedor were confiscated at some point. But, even if you could successfully gather up every gun in the city, I think that by now someone would have managed to get into the armory and taken a few out. I mean, don't you? I mean, a few guns around would be really, really useful. The absence of guns, even homemade ones, is simply unbelievable, and is yet another stupid choice by the developers. In Dying Light 1 I think they handled guns quite well, because in Haran guns and ammo were rare and expensive and only really accessible near the end of the game. And using guns was a two-edged sword, because if you started blasting away at enemies, you knew it would attract a gang of virals or volatiles that you'd have to fight off. So you always had to consider that trade-off and act accordingly. The absence of any kind of firearm in Villedor is frankly weird. The story. I could spend a lot of time criticising the story of Dying Light 2, but I won't, because I've already forgotten most of it. And to really understand the story you have to go around listening to tapes and reading newspapers, artefacts that help explain the history of Villedor and the backgrounds of some of the major characters, none of which I've done or am planning to do, to be honest. However, the main aspect of the story that sticks out to me as bad is the fact that a player doesn't really get much reward for their investment in the plot. To give an example, you spend the first half of the story in Old Villedor getting to know the players in the two main game factions, notably Sophie of the Survivors and Ator of the Peacekeepers. But when you get to the main part of the city, pretty much forget about these people and you have to get to grips with a bunch of new characters, whereas I would much rather have followed the progress of Sophia or Ator, but instead they're more or less discarded. This is a feature of a lot of the interactions you have with other characters in the game. You're introduced to them as if they were very significant to the story, then you either never see them again, or they just drop dead. It makes it quite hard to get invested in anyone, and I really just stopped caring after a while. Unfortunately, one of the characters who doesn't disappear or die early on is Lawan. I'm guessing the devs were intending to make Lawan a sassy, strong-willed, kick-ass kind of person, but what we got instead was someone who's just abrasive, unpleasant and rude. Lawan became the bane of my life, and my heart sunk every time she appeared because there was nothing really likeable about her. She's just loud, foul-mouthed and abusive. In fact, her whole character could be summed up as an unattractive, sweary psychopath. And when she's not being shouty and rude, she's just a bit depressing. And that's a problem with a lot of characters in the game. Most of the people you encounter just have really caustic personalities or are just irritating. The only people I really found myself rooting for were Ator and Harkon, and both of them were revealed to be a bit villainous later on. You have to feel a bit sorry for Harkon though, because he was Lawan's boyfriend for a while. I mean, look at this. It's like some kind of hostage photo. Overall, I think the story of Dying Light 2 was too confusing to be enjoyable. It's okay for a plot to be complicated, as long as you have enough information to piece together what's happening to you, and the bits that are still meant to be mysterious are clearly defined as being unknowns. But in Dying Light 2 there's a whole lot of stuff that's just too vague to be comprehensible, and I think that parts of the story were kept deliberately vague by the developers, because they knew that a lot of the plot just wouldn't hold up if it was laid out more clearly. It's like at the start of the game, when the villain switches the electricity on in a secret base, and this triggers a failsafe that automatically rains down missiles on Villedor. Why have that as an automatic function? You'd think there would be two switches, wouldn't you? One switch for putting the lights on, and another one for launching missiles. I mean, it's just one extra switch. Didn't anyone think there might be possibly an occasion where they might want to activate the secret base without setting off missiles as well? I mean, the story's full of things like this, things that don't happen for any good reason, but have to happen because the next part of the story, needs it to happen. Again, more false notes. And for me, I think the most disappointing part of the story is that I didn't really feel I'd achieved anything by the end of it. I mean, you take over windmills and water towers and power stations, but you just do that to give them to game factions. You can also take over metro stations if you want, but you never get the sense that you're helping to take back the city, which I think should be the aim of a game like this. As it is, you're just left shuffling pieces around, like you're rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. In Dying Light 1 there was a great game element where you could recapture safe houses that had been overrun by the infected, and to do that you'd either lure the infected out and shut the doors behind them, or you'd go in and kill them and then barricade the place to make sure it was safe. Now that was really good fun, and I wish they'd had something more like that in this game, but on a bigger scale. It would have been great if you had quests where you isolated parts of the city, perhaps by blocking off streets or the entrances to buildings. Then you had to go through eliminating all the infected inside the barricades, and once that was done the area would be clear for good. I think that would have been very entertaining and given you a real sense of accomplishment. I mean, you know, they could have had it so that you had to enter every dark zone within an area and complete any quests relating to that area before you were free to block it off and clear it out. That would ensure you got the most out of the game. And that would have also been a good reason to go out at night. I think I would have enjoyed that. Anyway, that's enough moaning. There's plenty to enjoy in Dying Light 2, but if you've not played any of the Dying Light games, I would recommend picking up the first one. It's fairly old now, but it still holds up really well. So there we go, there's the end. And hopefully join the channel for some of my other gameplay videos. Good night and good luck.